Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the Lifecycle Institute's March webinar. Today we have the director of the Lifecycle Institute, Bill Wilder. He is going to be presenting change management. Some things can't be delegated. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can use the chat function on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And if you have a technical question, you can send the question directly to the Lifecycle Institute, and our administrator will work to get that resolved for you. We do have the annotations available to you right now for the whiteboard, but once the whiteboard function slide comes up, we'll have an opportunity to use those. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Bill Wilder. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Lee, and welcome, everyone. Today we're going to talk about some of the things that cannot be delegated by leadership in a successful change management initiative. And I think a good starting point would be to ask you guys to give us some input by completing a poll on who do you typically hear about change from. So thinking about changes in your organization, if we could do a quick poll, who do you typically hear about those changes from in your organization? You've got several options there. Boss, a senior executive, a peer, maybe when you get home, or maybe on the news. So we've got a few more seconds here. And when you complete it, be sure and hit submit down at the bottom.
Can you see the response?
Let's see if we can see the results. Still working on them. Okay. Well, that's going to. Okay. All right. So while we are waiting for those results to be tallied, we're going to talk today about things that you should not delegate as a leader of a change in your organization. And we're going to do this based on a number of different changes that we have been a part of, two of them in particular, one at Alcoa Warwick Smelter, where they were highly successful and have sustained 7 years of culture change and improvements in their business processes as a result of the leadership maintaining or not delegating these tasks. By the way, as you see now, we do have our results. It's typically directly from your boss or the top executive, and occasionally even rumor or peer. And so what we're trying to work on today is having the top executive be a more active participant in that communication to you. So again, we're going to use Alcoa Warwick and talk a little bit about that situation where at the time we started working with them, they were one of the highest cost smelters in the program, and 43 years old, we're at risk of no longer being a viable operation. And here we are today, 7 years later, and maintenance costs have been reduced 38%, and they've sustained substantial financial improvements in their overall equipment effectiveness. So they're one of them. Another would be U.S. Sugar that we worked with, who had a number of different issues going on that were preventing them from being able to sustain a successful operation. Probably, at least for me, one that was most noteworthy was this whole idea that they were having to actually ship their raw goods to a competitor's site in order to produce the product. And now today their unit costs are down 30%, they're running all their product, and their stock price is way up, which of course is the language of the CEO and president of the organization. So what made these two in particular exceptionally successful? And we have others that are successful, but these two have been published recently as being phenomenal successes. And what we find is that they have engaged leaders. Not necessarily getting married, but they're engaged in the organization, and they are not delegating 4 essential tasks involved in sustaining a change initiative. And those tasks are the vision, the strategy, maintaining visibility, and building coalitions. When we talk about the vision, it's not just change at a rapid pace, because it is, and we all know it is, and it's a way of life. What really causes us discomfort or disorients us is when the change, it's not clear where the change is taking us. So we're going through a change, and is this thing going anywhere? I mean, does this change really mean anything? Is there a desired end to this change? So getting the vision right is very important, and having the senior leadership of the organization being able to articulate that vision is vital to sustaining the kind of results you want to sustain. So what are some of the attributes that we have seen in those two particular cases that make a very successful vision? One is a compelling story. So it needs, people connect facts and information and hopes around narrative. So if they can feel a story, it's an emotional thing. If they can feel a story about a brighter future, that they can look out over the horizon and they can see themselves being happier at home or happier in their work environment, and they can sense that in the form of a story, people will be engaged in the change. So when the leadership at Alcoa began to talk about how that particular site, although it would be 50 years old, would now be in the top quartile, and when you come to work, things are going to be organized, and you'll actually have a favorable relationship working with your operations partner. This is the kind of story people were hearing. Secondly is, what does it look like? Some kind of an image. So there's the story, which is the narrative, but then there's the picture. So some of us like to hear things in narrative form and hook things, in our minds on a story. Others are looking for a very specific, well-focused image or picture of what the future will look like, what the vision is. A third is that it has to be achievable. So they're looking for the vision to have some boundaries, right? So we're containing it in an area that's achievable. So we go into it inspired by the fact that we could be successful in the vision. And then lastly, it needs to be about the future. So it needs to kind of look into the crystal ball and think about what the future might hold, but in the context of a story and a crisp, focused, compelling image that is actually viewed and believed to be an achievable vision. The one final point I want to make about vision is one made by William Bridges, who has been a noted authority in the area of change for some time, and wrote a book called Transitions, which is all about the transitions or the phases one goes through in a change. And Mr. Bridges made the observation that the vision must be able to be articulated in 1 minute. So if we think about a compelling story, an image that's achievable and talks about the future, the shorter that is and the easier it is for me to grasp, the better. So one of the things that we believe at the Institute and we work with our clients on is that, yes, things are complex, and the work that we do is very complex. When we work with a client, we put together a master plan that can have as many as 900 plus over 1,000 tasks associated with it. And people admire that complexity. But the fact is they reward simplicity. So we've got to come up with a way to articulate in 1 minute or in an elevator speech how this vision supports that so that people can get behind it. In the case of U.S. Sugar, the president, Bob Bucher, quoted, and it's in this article that we're talking about, that you don't lay out a battle plan you can't explain in just a few words. So the key is 1 minute vision. Okay? So that talks a little bit about how long the vision should be and some of the components of it, but what would be the actual contents? Let's do a poll. Here are some options, as you can see, for what would be the top 3 pieces of information that you think should be in this vision. So let's everybody take a look at that and put in your answers for the top 3. We'll take a look at those results. We have quite a few folks on with us today, and many of them I know are very experienced professionals in undertaking a successful change. So let's see what the group feels are the 3 top contents or elements that need to be in a vision. So we've got 5 more seconds. Okay, here we go. I'm not going to argue with the sage advice of this group. The top 3 are the reason for the change, what is changing, and how are the people impacted. All that other is important, and it needs to be in that complex, what we're going to talk about next, which is strategy. When it comes to that vision that's going to be articulated in 1 minute, these 3 things need to be in it. What are we changing? Why are we changing? And how is it going to impact the people? The next thing is the strategy. And the senior leadership has to be engaged in the strategy. It doesn't mean they write all the details of the complex strategy, but there are 3 key areas that the clients that we work with are most successful focus their attention on. And the first is alignment. And this is aligning the goals and expectations and behaviors with the objectives of the change. So you have all these folks out there in the organization. They have different departments or different groups that they work with. They have specific goals that they have to work with. They have their own individual visions of where they're going with their groups. Your key role is to line them up and make sure that there's alignment among those goals. And that's a role that cannot be delegated. They're not, they need that sponsorship and coaching to bring these disparate groups, who are all great groups making good progress for your organization, but make sure that they're all aligned. Second is setting the priorities. So when it comes to the strategy, every organization we've ever worked with has competing initiatives. There are a whole host of initiatives going on in the organization from a variety of departments, from HR, from production, from maintenance, from EH&S, and all these different organizations imposing initiatives on the organization, and oftentimes even externally. It could be federal government, local government, could be the community. It's up to the senior leaders to establish the priority and put them in rank order, so that the organization understands when they have to make a decision between Initiative A and Initiative B, which one takes priority. Senior leadership makes that choice. And then last is resources. And by resources, it's the funding and the people. And ultimately, the senior leadership has to be involved in providing for that funding and providing for the people to create the momentum required for a successful change initiative. So far they've got to be involved in the vision, they've got to be involved in the strategy. Third is visibility. They've got to be actively engaged in the change and visible in the change. So here we have an opportunity for you to provide some input, and we have this set up for folks to input, right? So if you go to the top there, you'll see a T, and then over to the right of that, you'll see a little box where you can choose a color that suits your fancy. And let's just jot in here on the whiteboard, again, learning from the collective wisdom here, what are some ways that leaders can be visible in a change initiative? So let's just see what we come up with here. Okay, so you see some good ideas coming out of this. And you'll see a lot of it has to do with communicating and hearing and listening to what's going on. Anything from meetings to webcasts to walking the talk to being out there and actively engaged. There are a lot of different kinds of approaches that a leader can take to stand out and be highly visible in the change. We're going to focus in on 4 that we've seen have been highly successful for our clients in the change initiatives that we've been involved in. And the first is meetings, and it was one that came up several times as I just asked for your input. And just being a part of the meetings, particularly at the kickoff meetings and early in the process. What often will happen with our clients is that we'll be working with them, and we'll be working with them months and months and sometimes even years in preparing for the change. Then when it's time for the change to roll out, the leaders, I mean, they've been engaged in this for a long time, and sometimes lose that early energy that everyone else in the organization is looking for them to have. So it's important to sustain that and go into it, and all of these folks sitting in the room are looking for you to have that energy and enthusiasm, be able to articulate that 1-minute vision and that strategy for achieving the change. In the case of Alcoa, the Warwick site, Mark Knick talks about the fact that the leadership team led the town hall meetings. They were there to explain what the vision was and why we were going into reliability excellence, and have sustained it, and 7 years later are still involved in those kinds of meetings, talking about the success that has been achieved. So participating in the meetings doesn't mean you have to be in every single meeting, but it does mean that you need to make a plan to be visible in meetings and kicking those meetings off and showing your support. The next is managing by wandering around or walking around. And by this we mean just get out there, listen to people, go and see. It's a fundamental tenet of some of the continuous improvement processes in the manufacturing arena, sometimes called GIMBA or GINJA, but it's just getting out and having one-on-one conversations. Again, in the case of Alcoa and at U.S. Sugar, in those successful initiatives, one-on-one conversations with the employees by walking around were baked into the communications plan right from the get-go. So it was a continuous dialogue with the folks that were out there expected to initiate the change and make the change happen. Number 3 in visibility is multimedia. They use a lot of different ways to reach people, and constantly be reinforcing that short, simple message. In the case of U.S. Sugar, they were routinely communicating that their mission was change. Change. Change the way they work, change their priorities, change. And they used all kinds of media, from videos to posters to visual management to the meetings. And in all of the really highly successful initiatives that we work with, there's a wide variety of media used. And it's fairly commonly recognized that people need to hear things multiple times from multiple sources before they will sink in, especially when it becomes a change, when it involves a change that requires them to change their behavior that they could get away without changing. So you hear the adage that someone has to hear it 7 times from 7 different people at intervals. So using multimedia helps leadership achieve that. The 4th and last in visibility is recognition. And by recognition, we don't just mean that it's awards and trophies and so forth. And those are important, don't get me wrong. But it also has to do with what kind of metrics you're tracking and how people are being held accountable. So in the case of Alcoa, they created shared metrics in their organization between production and maintenance. So in the past, where they had siloed metrics, now they had shared metrics. They each could impact it. They each had an opportunity to impact it. So you create measures and metrics where both organizations have an opportunity to be a part of making decisions to achieve those metrics and have accountability for those metrics. And also, they used, at Alcoa and U.S. Sugar and other of our successful clients, they come up with small incentives. In the case of Alcoa, when they would recognize accurate and detailed work orders with gift certificates or gift cards, $25, $50, Target or Walmart or whatever, Best Buy cards or Amazon cards or whatever, just as a spontaneous, in the moment recognition of people who were exhibiting the behavior that they were looking for. And these were coming from the leaders. So the leader's out walking around, talking to someone, they see something that shows the behavior, the individual gets the card. The word spreads. And it doesn't have to be big. It's just the fact that they got recognized for that behavior. Pretty common, I think, behavioral, motivational advice. So there we go. We've got vision, strategy, and visibility. The last one that we want to touch on is coalitions. So there you are, standing in the middle of the group. You have these connections, these arrows going back and forth to all these different organizations that you work with, all these various entities. And it's up to you as a leader to help bring these together. And these could be internal or external. These could be any number of entities that or people that can influence whether or not you're successful with the change. And there are a lot of ways to approach this. The one we're going to chat about today is something referred to as Nemawashi. And it's essentially laying the foundation for the change by involving people. So that the concept is simple, and you've probably heard it before. Don't go into a meeting with a proposal without knowing before you walk in the door how everybody in that room feels about that proposal. So if I'm coming in and I'm going to propose that we reorganize a department, much better if I've socialized that with everybody that's going to be in that room. I know exactly where they stand. They may not necessarily every one of them agree, but I know where each individual in that room stands on that issue. So you don't go in without having done that pre-work. And the successful ones, again, looking at U.S. Sugar and Alcoa, extend this beyond just their immediate group. Right? So they look at operations and maintenance, and our processes involve changes in both of those cases. They engage them in discussing these changes and understanding their point of view even before the change is rolled out, operations and maintenance, or union and management, or contractors and employees, or all of the elements of your supply chain. So in every one of these, if you go look at these articles that I'm going to refer you to in a minute and read through them, you will see examples of where these organizations proactively sought out these various entities or people and got their, an understanding of what their point of view was before they went into it. And the whole idea is all about the roots, right? The roots that are the foundation of the entire initiative, right here, the roots. And this idea from the world of bonsai and back, that when you go out and you see a tree that you want to convert into a bonsai, they will go out a year, sometimes 2 years ahead of time and start working on the roots and preparing it. They don't just rip the tree out. You don't just rip the organization through change. The idea is you begin to do the work with the foundation, and that's where the whole term Nemawashi comes from. So on this last one, coalition, there are a lot of things that we can talk about on coalition, but the one point I guess I want to reinforce is this idea that you do one-on-one, independent engagement with the people involved in the change before you bring the whole root together and go through and rip the tree out of the ground. So there you go. Vision, strategy, visibility, and coalition. What are the risks of delegating those 4 tasks? So here we go with the whiteboard again. You'll remember this exercise where we typed in some ideas. Just go up to the T, pick a color that suits you, and let's see some ideas of what are some of the risks of delegating these tasks. There you go. Absolutely, no alignment, little buy-in, miscommunication, people going in different directions. So you know, when you don't do these things as a leader, as the single focal point and sponsor of the change, you're leaving it to everybody else, and just hoping that they get aligned on vision, strategy, and the coalition, as opposed to being proactively engaged in helping that happen. So you can see from this SAGE group that we're working with here, there are some definite risks associated with not personally engaging in these areas. So there you go, little buy-in for the change circled in big numbers. So here you go, do not delegate. Vision, strategy, visibility, coalition. Does that mean you don't get help and support with it? It does not. It means you do. But it means that you don't just hand it off and forget about it and hope for the best. So just to recap, vision, strategy, visibility, coalition. In the case of the vision, it needs to be a story that I can get emotional about. It needs to be a picture that I can see in my mind. It needs to be something that I feel like I can actually do. And it needs to be something that's out in the future, in the horizon that I can see. And when I pass you in the hall, you ought to be able to tell me what that is and share all those with me in 1 minute. In terms of the strategy, it gets us aligned. Get us in a room, make sure we're pulling in the same direction, make sure our metrics are aligned, make sure I know when I have to make a choice between A and B, that I know which one the organization wants me to pick first, and that I have the financial and human resources necessary to actually go about implementing the change. Get out and kick off the meetings, walk around, hear what people have to say, do posters, do meetings, do videos, tweet, blog, all that good stuff, and recognize people who are actually doing it, and recognize them early. And then lastly, build your coalitions by going out and talking to the folks that are going to be involved before we get the change started. If you want to hear some more or read some more about this, these 2 articles are really quite detailed articles about how these 2 organizations implemented these and how their leaders were engaged in that process. You can see both of these articles. There are PDFs of them available at lce.com. Just go in there and you can do a search in the top right-hand corner for success stories. Oh yeah, and it's in the chat. We've put it in the chat there, where to go. And you can download both of these PDFs, and I encourage you to do so. There's some real good tips in there about how you might be able to use these ideas in your organizational change. Also, you might be interested in having us help you with assessing some of the risks associated with the change you might be going through or contemplating. We have over 24 certified pro-side change management professionals in our organization, and we are willing to spend an hour with you just going through a simple assessment of the change attributes and the organization's capabilities, the leadership, the project management, and change management, and give you some feedback on what kind of risk you might be engaged in on your change. Next, we want to make you aware of the Association of Change Management Professionals Conference in Orlando in May. If you're involved in change management or interested in that particular profession, this is the place to be. This is the first of what will be many annual conferences of the Association of Change Management Professionals. The ProSci organization, which I would be glad to talk with you more about at some future day, has been very instrumental in having a couple of conferences in advance of this, but it is now being handed over to the Association of Change Management Professionals in Orlando this May. We will be there. I will be there. Lee Helms will be there. Scott Franklin. So 3 of our core team will be there. We'll have a little exhibit, and we're even contemplating doing a pre-conference workshop, so be on the lookout for that too. We're going to put in some proposals on that. Our next webinar is March 29th at 1 p.m., and in this particular case, we're going to look at the discipline of maintenance planning and scheduling, and specifically how to build the relationships, successful relationships, productive relationships with supervisors in maintenance and operation, as well as the equipment operators and the technicians. One of the biggest challenges that planners and schedulers face is working together with these groups to fulfill the planning and scheduling mission. So be with us then, March 29th at 1. And then here are some of the other classes that are coming up. So thank you very much for your participation. You'll soon get an email, probably in the next day or so, with a link to a recorded version. And if you have any questions, please let us know. Thank you very much.